On today's video, we're going to talk about the boring secret to getting great. Everyone wants to learn new techniques, new punches, new kicks, but only a few want to do the moves over and over and over again until they become muscle memory. Repetition is boring, but boring is what creates mastery. This is why repetition matters. It builds muscle memory, it sharpens technique, and it makes sure that you're not wasting any movement. It also builds conditioning and keeps you in shape. You all have heard the saying before that the amateur does it until they get it right, but the professional does it until they can't get it wrong. So monotony is important, and we have to learn how to embrace it. In fitness, it's very common for folks to try to zone out and let their mind go somewhere else while they're working out. You have all kinds of things to keep you occupied. A lot of people watch TV while they're working out. A lot of people listen to music while they're working out, and use external things or distractions to get them through the workout. I've even heard some people say that they can't work out without music, and some even will turn around and go home to pick up their music if they forget it at the house. So there's a lot of dependency on distractions when it comes to fitness. The problem with that is that when we're talking about combat sports, when we're talking about martial arts, that approach will not work for you. That approach will not yield you the best results. When we're developing a skill, we use repetition to ingrain that skill into muscle memory. But if we just go through the movement and go through the motion, those reps that we put in will not pay off the way that they could pay off. We have to be deliberate. We have to be able to focus on each individual repetition in order to get the most out of the reps that we're putting in. Yes, when you're doing the repetition, you are creating that muscle memory, but it happens a lot better when it's done deliberately. Yes, you also have the fitness aspect of it, the conditioning aspect of it. That too is done a lot better when it's done deliberately. So we have to learn how to embrace the monotony. But the cool thing about it, when you start to focus on each individual rep and you make it a point to improve every rep, that thing that was once boring and repetitive ends up becoming interesting and dynamic. There's always, you have multiple different pieces of detail that's involved in throwing, for example, a punch. So a lot of times we think that it's boring because we're approaching it incorrectly. When we start to focus on the small details that are involved, it stops being boring. It takes that boredom away. So we have to embrace the monotony. It actually will turn what on the surface looks like monotony, because you're doing it over and over and over and over again. It'll turn that into a different experience for you. It'll make it so each rep is an experience in of itself. Each rep, you can be focused on a different detail. So for example, if I'm throwing the jab is not just about me throwing my lead hand straight to the target and bringing it back. There are dozens of different details that are involved in throwing that jab. And all of those things can be focused on while you're throwing that jab over and over again. And we have to train ourselves to pay attention to those details while we're doing it. And when we do that, it takes the monotony out of the repetition. So with throwing the jab, what else is involved? What is your other hand doing when you're throwing the jab? Is that hand high enough? Is the jab going straight to the target and coming back? Where are my feet? Where's my chin? Am I breathing? Is the punch straight? Just right there off the top of my head, I named a dozen things that you could be focusing on that will hold your attention to the repetition without you becoming bored. And that's how you embrace the monotony of it. So yes, the reps will eventually become muscle memory. But when we take it to the next level and become deliberate and intentional with our movements, it becomes very, very, I would say, entertaining. You can play a little game with yourself. And I tell people, make a checklist. And as you start to develop, that checklist is going to grow. You could be one day focused on one detail, and then the next day focused on another detail. And you continue to play these games with yourself until that punch or that technique is ingrained into your DNA. You understand every fine detail that's involved in performing that technique. That's how you embrace the monotony. When you're able to embrace the monotony, then there's no more boredom. But if you don't embrace that monotony and you're just going through the motions, then you're going to run into boredom. So when you are not paying attention to the details and just going through the motion, you're only seeing the technique on the surface level. You're only scratching the surface. And it is very possible that you could spend months just going through the motion and not improve. That's with putting in the work. That's with doing the reps. When you turn those reps into deliberate, intentional reps, each rep, it makes it so much more interesting. You discover the wonder that's involved in the reps. You realize that there are so many fine details that can be improved on, that can be worked on. You're practicing how to hold your weight. You're paying attention to your balance. You're paying attention to your energy. You're paying attention to which knuckle is hitting the target. These are all details that will improve and contribute to the quality of your technique. And that's how you fast track your development in your skills by being deliberate. I tell people, go when you're not, and the thing is, if you don't pay attention to those details, what you end up doing is reinforcing the bad technique that you started with. So if you throw a punch incorrectly, because obviously the first time you step on the mat, your punches aren't going to be 100%. So throwing a subpar technique 100 times just makes that subpar technique muscle memory. You have to remember that each rep is either a contribution to good technique or bad technique. And in order to make sure that it's a contribution toward good technique, we have to be extremely deliberate with every rep. With the way that my program is designed, it's designed around repetition. So we have 3-minute rounds with, where we're doing, an individual combination on the bag, even an individual punch. We're throwing the jab or we're throwing the cross, we're throwing it over and over and over again. And then we have an active 60-second rest where we're doing some sort of calisthenics in between. So my program is built on repetition, but I have to make sure that my students are not just going through the motion, because we could be backfiring. I could be working against myself if I don't make sure that they understand what it is that they're trying to do and what it is that they're trying to accomplish. The reps have to be deliberate. Like I said, when you're putting in the reps, each rep will either contribute to your good technique or contribute to bad technique. And because starting off, your technique is going to be closer to bad than good, it's very important to be deliberate. And that's why I always tell people to slow down. Slow down. And you also, from the aspect of conditioning, you'll get a better workout by being more deliberate. You can actually get a solid workout by making sure that all of the details of the combination or the technique is correct and doing it slow. Because that's going to take an effort. When I'm focused on where are my feet, how's my balance, what's happening with my other hand, where's my chin, when I'm making sure all of the pieces that are involved in throwing this one punch or this combination are in place, that takes effort, especially beginning, especially starting out. So when you're starting, it's definitely not a good idea to just go through the motions. I tell people all the time, this is not a Tae Bo class, and no offense to Billy Blanks, enough respect, shout out to Billy Blanks. But this is not just we're going to go through the motions and throw something close to what we're trying to throw. No, we want to be improving with every technique, with every repetition. So it's going to be very, very important to understand that the monotony of it is only as bad as you allow it to be. And in trying to zone out and take your mind somewhere else, you actually end up contributing to the monotony and the repetitive nature of it. Because you cannot avoid the reps. There's no way around them. The only way to develop any sort of muscle memory, to develop any sort of skill set, is through the repetition. But the mistake that people make is they want to just go through the motion and not have to confront the monotony. But what I'm here, and the reason why I'm making this video, is to demonstrate and explain that the monotony is actually the solution to the monotony, if that makes sense. Embracing the repetitive nature of it is the only way to get over the repetitive nature of it. The more you try to run from it, the more you make this into a going through the motions, cardio kickboxing type situation, the quicker you're going to get bored. When you start to zero in on the technique, when you start to focus on each individual repetition, that's when you overcome the boredom of it. That's when it ends up being that every repetition is different. Every repetition is something new. Every repetition is a step forward. Every repetition is a new place. And you can only get to that place when we're talking about repetition. We're talking about the repetitions that are necessary to develop a skill set. You only get to that place by embracing the monotony, embracing the repetitive nature of it. And when you embrace the repetitive nature of it and embrace the monotony, that's when you find the wonder. All right, guys, I gotta run. Coach Sully, Reps and Sweat Martial Arts and Fitness. This was Matt Chat.